Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Social Discourse. My name is Sakina Datu. Now, as Muslims, we believe that Islam is a complete code of life. It guides us on all aspects of living, from personal hygiene to how to dress up, the manner of speech and relationships, and what to even think and what to believe in, what to eat, what to avoid, how to choose our spouses, how to nurture our children even before conception, and even how to deal with things like grief and rituals around the death. But we live in a society where religion is increasingly being mocked, and every effort is made to move us towards secularism. Now, without sweeping the questions our young people, and indeed even not so many young, ask, we want to explore today the role of religion in our lives. Is religion, Islam in our case, truly liberating, or is it sometimes limiting? And how? Now, to help us dissect the subjects in depth, we have today with us Sister Wesen Al-Shamari. Sister Wesen is a life coach and a speaker. And we also have with us remotely Sister Sukaina Rajwani. She's the chairlady of Haidari Community Center based in South London. Welcome, ladies. Wa alaikum salam. Let's start with you, Sister Wesen. There is a big push against religion in, lately as we look at especially the Western world that we live in. What is so important about religion in terms of what is its role in our lives?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, like I said, thank you for having me on today. The role of religion in our lives, I believe ultimately is the guidance. We say religion. For me, I feel that religion, I rather look at religion as faith, Iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent the Quran to us, and the prophets, of course, and then the successors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ahlulbayt. All of this has been constructed for our guidance. Like, imagine yourself driving, for example. So if you're driving somewhere to a location where you don't know, you would have your sat-nav, okay? And that helps to guide you to your route. And it's the same in life. We need some kind of guidance. People think that it's quite restrictive, but I don't personally think so. Personally, I think it's an empowerment, especially the Quran. In fact, I genuinely believe that everything that the Quran has taught us is an empowerment in our life. It allows us to become liberating. It liberates us. So, yeah, a guidance, ultimately, the role of religion.
Yeah, we'll come to all those aspects of liberation and what exactly they mean. But Sister Sukaina, do you see that maybe, the way we interpret the concept of religion in this country in particular is quite different in terms of there is that separation of, for example, the church and the state. So religion is a part of your life and, part of faith, whereas for us in Islam, religion is literally everything. It's a whole code by which we live. So in your view, do you ever find anything about Islam and religion in general that you find limiting?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for the invite to the show today. Before I start, just to share a disclaimer, I am not a scholar or an expert in any capacity, and all views I put forward today are purely my own. So just to recap on what Sister said, religion ideally does serve multiple purposes, in my opinion. On a basic level, it does give us meaning in life, a sense of direction and a goal to strive towards. When we look at the opposite end of the spectrum, an atheist, a person that does not practice religion may also have a goal and purpose and a personal moral code of conduct that they adhere to. But religion does add another layer. It adds a spiritual dimension which transcends then into our physical actions, and it defines our boundaries and moralities and practices very clearly. It allows us to build our character. And the moral conduct of a person without religion is subject to change because it's based on their own understanding and their concept of right and wrong. And as a person's intelligence can either evolve or devolve, their goalpost can keep on changing. And whilst with religion, these boundaries are established and it makes it easier to shape our lives accordingly. You ask if religion limits us. I feel that this varies from person to person, and it depends on an individual's perspective and their personal experiences through which their personal worldview is formed. So just taking an example, regarding dressing, for example, taking hijab as an example in the West. If you take this as an example, a woman who may think that people are being judgmental and judging her looks and her dressing, she might find this restrictive and limiting, whereas another woman who sees it as enhancing her dignity and giving her an identity, she might find this liberating. So whilst I do agree that there may be physical limitations, I disagree that religion curtails, spiritual and intellectual liberation.
Sister Masin, though, it is a fact sometimes that we all feel at certain points, whether it's good for us or bad, there comes a time in everyone's life that you find things limiting. So this is not to say that Islam is not good for us or hijab is not good for us, but as individuals, we all go through those phases when we think, it is very restrictive. I can't just wear anything, I can't speak anything. For example, we are told very strongly against, ghiba. And there is fun in it. I mean, let's be honest, it's nice to sit with your friends and talk about people. When we understand the values around it, that's something else. It takes you to a different level. But generally, you do find restriction in terms of food, in terms of drinks, entertainment, where can you go, where can't you go. Why do you feel that Allah did not give us the ability to just be free and be ourselves and explore and learn through our own experiences?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did give us the ultimate freedom. The ultimate freedom as well, not necessarily to just even in religion, to choose your religion. But, and in addition to that, we have our conscience that can decide if it's right or if it's wrong. Now again, the Quran, He sent down the Quran for a reason. And the purpose of the Quran is to guide us, like I mentioned. But you say, if it restricts us? I'll bring the topic of the hijab as well. Yes, we have a choice. We do have a choice. But we also know that, okay, it's written in the Quran. There are verses that recommends that we do cover. But it's our choice, whether nobody forces us. Let's state fact that there is no force and there's no compulsion in forcing us. But if you're saying restrictions, everything in life is balance. For example, I'll give you another analogy. You want to lose a bit of weight or you want to get a certain physique, so you decide to go to the gym, so therefore you have to maybe check on your diet and things like that. So maybe you might restrict yourself from certain food types in order to shed the weight. Those are restrictions. Why is it only religion that is deemed, has a negative connotation attached to those restrictions actually benefit us? They're not for Allah. Yeah. This is all for our benefit. Benefit not just for the hereafter, but also in our lives now. You drink, people know the consequences. You drink, okay, it might intoxicate you, but what about where it could potentially therefore lead you? Could lead you to, obviously, unhealthy drinking, addiction, can lead you to depression. Yeah. So that's the problem with, with these restrictions, with these limitations. But again, like the sister said, sometimes they're not, it depends on your perspective. They may not be restrictions, but they work in our favour. I believe they work in our favour. And they help it's for our benefit, ultimately.
Yeah, we, Sister Skina, we see this especially, among our young people. And today, our youngsters really question these things. And I want to talk about it because a lot of time, we're very judgmental. When young people raise questions and we just say to them, you've lost your path and you've lost your ways and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But these are real challenges because they live in a country and in a society that is quite different from where we grew up. And you find these young people, the messages they get from the society, from the media, from the education system is all about you are in charge of your own life. You are the decision maker. And therefore, nobody should dictate to you what you should do. And you find young people saying to us, let me explore myself, let me make my own mistakes, and if something is not good for me, I will learn. And we find the issues, for example, today of young people, especially those of teenage years or university years, things like sister, drugs, alcohol, this is very common. We don't like to talk about it, but our young people are finding it and actually feel sometimes really sad for them, because the kind of jihad they are going through, we never really had to go through that, most of us, So, Sister Sukina, how do we address this, and how do we, intelligently guide our children, and when they put forward these kind of arguments, because they are getting these messages from the society saying to them, it's your life, and it's your decision, and you need to explore and then decide what you want. So what would be your answer to these young people?
So to share my opinion, boundaries are not necessarily negative things. They're more of a safe space for the children, for the young adults to explore. And I feel this idea needs to be communicated effectively to these young people so that they do not feel that they are being deprived or missing out in any way. They're not missing out on any valuable experiences. See, all experiences such as, drinking, if we look at drinking or taking drugs, they're not always necessary. And it is important to learn lessons from other people's experiences. If we look at, if we look at keeping religion aside and using logic and intelligence, it is a logical conclusion for an intelligent person that drugs, alcohol, etc. do not offer any benefits, as Sister mentioned, and they have a lot of downsides. We do not need religion to tell us this. Sometimes we do focus too much from a religious viewpoint, whereas the same conclusion can be derived logically. And I keep on saying, even to my girls, that not all experiences are necessary, or nor do they have a learning process to it. And this is something that we need to communicate effectively to our younger generation.
Obviously, absolutely correct. But Sister, do you think that we do have a system whereby we do offer our young people an alternative?
On the back of what Sister was saying then, in response to that question, sometimes in the West, perhaps especially, these things such as drinking or going out, or we think that our children may be missing out on them. But the thing is that the West have identified these things, have made them attractive, and they've said that these are fun things. But who gets to define what fun is? And this all starts with parenting as well, I believe. As a mother myself, 2 teenage daughters and younger sons, but you need to start with them at home. And yes, so in reply to your question, are there things being done? I believe that things have started, organisations, charities, mashallah, have started to organise programmes for the youth. There are little and not as often as I think we'd like it to be, but they are coming. They are coming.
Yeah. Before we go back, and I want Sister's input on that, because she is involved in running a center. But before that, you mentioned the issue of parenting, and how it starts from home. Now this sometimes, and some other, you must know this, that sometimes as parents, we do everything we can do. And there's a lot of parents out there, who have expressed the difficulty that when children do go astray, or children get, not even going astray, but get involved in things that are not very positive, it always reflects on the parenting of the parents. And this is not always the fault of the parents, because you may have done all the things that are right, but there are a lot of influences, from the society. And one of the things I've found is, especially for us women and as mothers, the guilt and the blame is so big that forget about others, even it's your own guilt is something that you can't live with, thinking continuously that, you have done something wrong. Now, you as a life coach, how would you address that?
Yes, yeah, great question. And this is definitely something that I address with my clientele, and I've helped many women with this. Motherhood is a challenge, a rewarding one, can I add, but that we weren't given a manual, sister, and we do try our level best. But having said that, we need to keep ourselves up to date and educated as well. And we're only human, and we are learning as we go along. Now, in terms of we could do everything for our children, I completely agree. But also, we need to make sure that our homes are safe and non-judgmental. And I do see within certain families that culture sometimes overlaps religion, unfortunately. Maybe sometimes not fault of the parent, really, because that's just how they were raised as well. They don't know anything better or any other different. Now, yes, we can go to majalis to help with this. Circle of influence is extremely critical, because we were not meant to raise our children on our own. It takes a village to raise a child.
Absolutely.
Okay? So we're not meant to know all the answers. We weren't designed. However, having said that, we must ensure that the environment that we create for our children is a safe and non-judgmental. They need to feel safe. When they feel safe, and I'm actually getting goosebumps because somebody said that to me the other day about my children. And honestly, I was in tears, because that's a blessing. When a child feels safe, sister, they feel invincible. They can talk about things, and you have to be completely transparent and honest with your child. And personally, that's the route I've taken with my children, because I need them to come to me. God forbid, if there's a question or a problem or an issue, I need them to come to me. Who else are they meant to go to?
And let's hear the same view from Sister Sukina in terms of, we as mothers, sometimes I think maybe we thought we knew what we were doing, because, we watched our mothers, the way they raised us, and not to say that, we are the best of creations, but alhamdulillah, we sort of are on the path. And so we thought if we adopted the same system that our parents did, our children would end up in the same manner, and sometimes that doesn't happen, because, even I talk to a lot of women, and the pain you see parents sometimes going through when children are doing things that are not, in the values of what the parents grew up with. Do you feel, Sister Sukina, that even as parents, even though we think a lot of times that we know what we're doing, that there needs to be a lot more support, a lot more advice on things that, we suddenly come into once our own children are teenagers, and we were never told, how things are going to be?
So yes, I do agree. As parents, it is our continuous and combined effort, in collaboration with the society that we live in and the communities that we live in, to offer, our children halal alternatives and to empower them to freely explore within the boundaries of Islam. However, we do need to be constantly vigilant to ensure that we can have that safe space at home within our communities, and like Sister said, have that facility around us that we have friends and a circle of people who are not judgmental for our kids. It is hard, and at the end of the day, what I can say is, we do our best. We at that point in time, we do what we feel is best for them, and leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, and I actually heard a very good, there was a majalis, and I heard a statement which really made me think a lot, and this reciter was talking about Prophet Adam, and how he had obviously, Habil and Kabil, and so he was saying, and Prophet Shish, and that he has raised a child who was a martyr. He raised a child who became a prophet, but he also raised a child who was a murderer. So this is a prophet who ended up having a child who was a murderer. So sometimes when things don't go right, it's not always that the parents are wrong. And I think sometimes that gives a lot of courage to, people when they're struggling, that instead of looking within and questioning why and where have we gone wrong, is to come out and seek and, ask for support and help. So that, because even prophets have not gone wrong as such, but even their children haven't always turned out right. Now, one of the issues that I find is this concept that Sister mentioned about being judgmental. Now, as communities, Sister, we are so judgmental, that even as a parent, you are scared of saying something about your child, or the children themselves feel like they don't want to be part of it. How true is this?
Unfortunately, it can be very true.
Yeah.
But again, your circle of influence, we try to make it as non-judgmental as possible. My advice is, if you find that people are judgmental, then you stay away from them. Having said that, it's not always possible, because sometimes it's probably your nearest and dearest, family. Now, again, religiously in the Quran, you're not meant to judge. The Prophet ﷺ says you're meant to find 70 excuses before you assume on somebody. Now, let me just take you to that 70 excuses. How long will it take you to find 70 excuses? I mean, literally, count. An hour or two?
Yeah.
And who has the effort for that? As they say in the coaching world, stay in your lane. Really focus on yourself. So we need to get rid of the guilt though as well, to be fair, but...
Yeah. Sister Skina, in terms of, I know that you lead... you do a lot of events at Haidari, and some of the events are specifically catered to the younger people. What are some of the challenges that you find? Do you feel like these are the places that our young people want to come to? Do they feel comfortable coming to the community centers? Do they feel like, it's a judgment-free place, and that there can be an alternative to, say, having groups within their universities that may not be necessarily the best place for them to seek socializing?
So coming to mosque, coming to religious events is always a plus. There's advantages to that. I do feel that we are facing at the present times a real threat to religiosity at present. So practices such as, praying, fasting, wearing hijab, abstaining from haram food, abstaining from alcohol, and so forth, is becoming more and more challenging, especially for our youths that go to universities. They find these occurring. They have friendships. They have circles of friends who do, frequent these places. So, on a community level, what should we do to support these children or these young adults? We are trying to move away from traditional methods of preaching and be more in lines with the times. Therefore, to educate and create interest within our community at all levels. We attempt to organize programs and events that would appeal to today's generation, whether they be interactive sessions, discussion circles, debates and workshops. So these tend to bring in the youths. They tend to, be of interest to our youths. We also try and organize sports as much as possible, as well as social events. So it's not all about religion and preaching and that end of the spectrum. It's a well-rounded, holistic approach, and it's something that they want to come and enjoy at mosque rather than just come and listen to a lecture. So these are some of the methods we've adopted to sort of try and combat these challenges that we're facing in the present times.
Which is so important, isn't it? I mean, like, of course, I know that there are more efforts being made now because there is a lot more awareness now. Like, we've lost attendance of our young people in our centers, which is a fact. You know, every center sees that the younger people are getting fewer and fewer. So we've started addressing that. But so one of the issues I want to mention before we move on from this issue is that it's not always only the young people who face these issues, or even the questioning, the whole questioning of religion and faith and, you know, the roles. I find that a lot of women in particular, rather than men, you know, when they hit their mid age, and there could be a lot of reasons. There could be changes in their, you know, relationship statuses, could be changes in their, you know, menopause, whatever it is, change in your work situation. That this is a very also difficult time when you start questioning, you know, you're suddenly thinking, what is my life, you know, where am I going, who am I? And then there is the culture. And, you know, you don't know sometimes where the boundaries are, where does religion end, and where does, you know, culture come into that, and specifically when it comes to us women and the roles we have to play. How challenging is that from what you come across?
Women in Islam. Yes, especially with the hijab. And especially, as you said, in recent times, we have to remember our purpose. Collectively as Muslim women, but also individually. What's our purpose? And rightly so, I think you hit a certain age because of maturity, because of life experience, perhaps, the, you know, combination of different factors, that you suddenly then realize, okay, what am I doing now? Okay, and again, this is something that I see time and time again in my life coaching. But what I try to do as a speaker in particular, when I go to schools, and I speak at mainly girls' schools, is about confidence and instilling that from a very young age so that we don't get so confused when we reach a certain point. So nipping it at the bud, first of all. But let's talk about more mature women. Remembering your purpose, really. What's your existence here? But sometimes women lose their identity through marriage and motherhood because they focus so much of their life on just giving it to their children and their spouse. But Allah, in fact, we have plenty of beautiful women in Islamic history. Lady Khadija, for example, Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, Lady Zainab alayhi salam. You know, these are noble women. If we just look to them, and honestly, these are our role models that inspire us. If we look to what they did in their life, at least that can kind of, again, guide us to what our purpose should be. So in my particular life coaching, I talk about your innate gift, the gift that Allah gave you, and to remember to work with that. So, for example, you might be a very creative individual, might be a bit of a perfectionist. So once you understand that self-awareness, and again, that's from the Quran, once you know yourself, you're invincible, really. Absolutely. The world is your oyster. But again, we lose our identity. So I advise women to just be more self-aware of.
Sister Sukina, you know, a lot of, most women, I think all of us, at some point we come to this stage when we have a bit of rethink about, you know, what is our role, what are we doing and everything. But some women, you know, because of either whatever their circumstances might be or situations may be, tend to kind of become so rebellious at this stage because they've always been told sort of what to do. And they think, okay, I don't want any of this now anymore. I'm going to explore. I'm going to become. What at that stage? What do you think is the problem, number one, and what can be the solution? Because sometimes it's also culture. You know, I've heard a lot of women say, you know, because the culture sometimes can be so oppressive towards women. Unfortunately, all our Muslim cultures, you know, when you take the Indian subcontinental, the Arab culture, I mean, sort of, they can be. I'm not saying they are, but they can be quite oppressive, you know, in their culturally towards women. So these women, sometimes they don't see the lines merging. And whereas it's not Islam, Islam has never told you in any way to accept, to be subjugated. But because of the culture that you have been living in, there comes this point in time where but they don't want to hear anything at all. And they are at a stage whereby they don't want to hear the word Islam or advice. How do we ensure that we don't lose out this group of women? How do you support them? I mean, if you are leading, for example, a center for women, what would you do? How do you think you would address this?
So personally, coming from a Khoja background myself, and having lived in East Africa as well as the West, I have seen, as you say, that religion and culture, it does sometimes get intertwined, and there is often a blur between the two. What is religion? What is culture? That happens. Having said that, I feel this is not always a bad thing, as some cultural practices are acceptable within the boundaries of Islam, and they do enhance our identity instead of creating limitations. However, as you've already mentioned, there are some daily lifestyle habits that that have crept in from our cultures, inherent culture, as well as some religious practices that lean more towards culture than Islam. And I do feel that we are lucky to live in an era where questions can be raised. Alhamdulillah, we have many, many learned scholars, many learned people amongst us within our communities who can address these issues and remove any misconceptions and negative cultural practices. Personally, I do not feel that this is such a pressing issue at present as it was in the past. However, talking personally, we do often come across these women that you speak about, who sort of have lost a sense of purpose. And if we were creating a center, like you said, for women only, what would it include? I think it's very important for women to have that space to interact, to have that social discourse, to go in, have a circle of like-minded people that they can share with in a non-judgmental environment. So these are just repetitions of what we've already spoken about, and it is very important for not just youth but also women to have this space where they can feel at home, be at home, and especially living in a country like UK where everything is so nuclear, we tend to be so alone at times. Sometimes there's no family around, friends, people are busy in their own lives, doing their own things. There's no one to call, pick up a call and, say hello and ask about you. So it is important to create these networks, and we can only do it, within the boundaries of Islam, within our centers. That would be ideal if we could, sort of organize some sort of network, some sort of structure that the women can fall back on and have that support that they require, bringing back the purpose into their life.
Absolutely, sister. I think that is so important. And, also I think sometimes, when we were talking about the upbringing, it's if the values were right, at some point there will be challenges, but if you've planted the right seeds, hopefully, and we pray that after having gone through some kind, we all go through phases whereby we lose it a bit and then we come back. But also there's a lot of discussion lately on things like, for example, without realizing how we get involved in things like Halloween. Yesterday was Halloween. And you find that a lot of people these days forget the lines, and you find a lot of our Muslim kids, it's seen as it's a bit of fun, it doesn't have any negative connotations, and we forget that, the concept, for example, behind that is so negative. The kind of people you dress up as and look up to and emulate. And you were talking about the ladies we have, for example, Lady Khadija, Bibi Fatima. We don't have an opportunity ever to sit down and think, okay, today let me dress up like Lady Khadija and think about what she was, but we have all these movie characters that we try, and we forget that it's not a bit of fun. This is when our children grow up. This is a crisis, isn't it? This is a crisis of identity.
And on the back of the sister as well, saying about we need some kind of network, and exactly that sometimes we can forget what's happening. But first of all, when I say educating the children at home, talking to them about why we don't do things. And again, the definition of what fun is. But rightly so, what do we have then? What's our alternative?
Yeah.
What's our solid alternatives? As I said before, earlier on, that there are, establishments and organisations, but we need to do more. We need to do so much more, especially, so for example, I have something, in the pipeline, inshallah, coming up, but it's not just about me and what I plan. We need plenty more sisters to do these things, but to have memberships, to have groups or circles, whether now everybody's working, virtually, so it is possible, where we can come as like-minded individuals. Absolutely. But also, like we just discussed in the previous conversation, that when women get to a certain age and they feel like they've got no purpose or sense of purpose, when they join such accountability circles, when there's like-minded individuals, they will see that, oh, she goes through the same thing, so I'm not alone. Yeah. And I'm not weird, or I'm not, there's nothing wrong with me.
And there's nothing more powerful than sisterhood. I mean, when you meet like-minded people and you just sit for an hour of conversation, the energy, the positivity with which you come out can totally change your perspective in things. Yeah. Now, we've addressed the issue of the youths and women, but, it would not be fair if I did not address the issue of our men at the moment. And I think a lot of men are suffering also, because the way we've talked about women, and there is, even though sometimes we have all these challenges, we have avenues, we talk. That's one of our advantages, yeah? I mean, we can sit anywhere and we will get going. There is a huge group of young men now, especially, again, midlife crises, who are questioning their whole identity. Feminism has taken over a lot, not negatively, but like what men used to know to be their role as the head of families, and they used to be the, breadwinners. Things have changed. And now sometimes they reach this midlife crisis, and you find that, you must know, statistics-wise, men go through depression a lot more than women. Is there an avenue, or is there enough thinking being done about how do we address this group of men? It's easier, I think, still for women. Put them together, they'll just start talking. What do you do with the men?
Great question. What do we do with our men? What do we do with our men? The same. Yeah. Because they're human. The problem is that they don't like to talk, perhaps, willingly. Sometimes they might need a push. But I also believe it's the same thing. They need a network where they can vent, where they can share experiences. Dads, for example, we talk about, postnatal for women, but then what about the dads? Nobody, sometimes the dads aren't asked really how they feel, or the pressure. Sure. The financial pressure, the other obligations that they have to uphold within the family unit. So again, I really think that it's important. So for any of the life coaches or speakers out there, I think a network is really, really important. But again, programs. We said about the Majlis and things like that. But I really do believe that there should be programs in place. Again, in person is ideal, where men can. And not just that, just when I say programs, I'm talking about whether, just sit down for a coffee mornings, for example, or even sports activities where if they don't like to talk, then maybe through a passion, And a lot of men do get involved in things like sports and stuff, but sometimes, unfortunately, if there is no guidance, they can get in, company with a group of friends who lead them away. And Sister Sukina, with us women, I think sometimes we do a lot of deep thinking, which is a positive thing, because, even if there comes a question when we will question why we have to wear hijab, why do we have to do that, why do we have to do this, we question it. And by questioning it, we
we are constantly spiritually reviving ourselves and staying in focus and connected to our Lord. And I don't know if I'm doing disjustice to men, but I do find that the same level of questioning doesn't happen with men. And therefore, there isn't all that. It's almost like silently, they do not change. They believe what they've always believed and they move on. And sometimes, if they are not within a best group of people, friends or family or whoever, it's almost like a very silent death of spirituality within them. Is that your assessment, or do you think I'm way off?
So this actually reminds me of back home. I remember when I used to go to mosque back home in Dar es Salaam, and then we would be coming out of mosque. There was a big group of men sitting outside doing baraza, and I remember that really, really well. And I felt that this gave them that avenue to sort of vent, to talk. Though I don't know what sort of talking they were doing, but it gave them an opportunity to connect, and more so I've been seeing this in UK or in London. I've seen these baraza groups of men, and I do feel that it's quite healthy for them, that even though they may not be able to talk emotionally with each other and sort of share, like you said, deeper conversations around spirituality or emotions, it still gives them that avenue to discuss and maybe vent and talk about things that are topmost in their mind. So yeah, this when we were speaking about the men, this is what came in my mind instantly. The men need a baraza. That's what they need.
So I think we need a few more barazas
Can
our
Can I
community.
add
Yes.
to that actually as well? That's a good point, sister. But I think also the woman, the wife can help. Well, it depends if it's if he's married or not. But the females in his life as well, to help push them, to get involved with these activities.
And of course, we know, the woman, end of the day, is you make or break a house, and but sometimes you also need them to go away a little bit and explore it elsewhere. Now, we've talked about religions. Of course, we don't believe that it's limiting, and we have acknowledged that it is liberating. What is this liberation? Coming to the deep discussion that we talked about. Because what is the end goal of any religion, whether it's, any of the monotheistic religions or even none? Is it just the end of the day, is when we die, it's heaven and hell? Is that our end goal? Is that where religion is supposed to take us?
Ultimately, yes. Ultimately, yes. As Muslims, we believe that. However, we don't know. Inshallah, we all have long lives, but we don't know if we're going to be living for another day or another decade. And it's the little steps that we take towards that matter. Every second, and I mean every second, a thought can help us towards a certain goal, towards performing religious rituals, towards good habits, towards the righteous path, Salat al-Mustaqim, or otherwise. So ultimately, yes, it is about the hereafter. But obviously, in order for us to get to, inshallah, heaven, we have to enhance this journey. Okay, I don't like to use the word improvement because it makes it sound like maybe there's something wrong. We've been given this beautiful life. Enhance it. We've been given, each one of us, the free will, but also a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Use it, enhance it. How are you going to serve humanity? And really, and ultimately, it makes you happy and it makes everyone else happy. But how are you going to use your gift during this life?
Yeah, but it's also, what I'm trying to point out is that, there has to be more than just heaven and hell. And Sister Tukina can help me with that, because we hear Imam Ali say to us that, your worship of Allah, should not be like business, or like, it shouldn't be just in fear of hell, or just, that you're just wanting to achieve, but that you should worship Allah having recognized Him. And if we worship Allah having recognized Him, and then the religion does not become just about heaven and hell at the end of it all, it's about every moment that love of God that completely empowers you, overpowers you, and the pleasure that you get day in and day out, and the whole purpose of your life, the way it is shaped with just that concept of love of Allah. Sister Sukina, how do we get to that stage?
So I actually looked up the definition of liberation in the Oxford Dictionary of English, and it is defined as the action of setting someone free from imprisonment, slavery, or oppression. And then there was a second definition, which is freedom from limits on thought or behavior. So my viewpoint on this conversation that we're having right now is in line with the second definition, that liberation is to be free. It is not to be imprisoned by the mind, not to be bound by the culture that we reside in, and not to fall into the traps of expectation of the society that we live in. So Islam allows us this liberation. It allows us this liberation to grow. It allows growth within ourselves, to not to be tied to these things, and to reach our full potential. And just to sort of coming to mind, I recently read this article called Islam, a Manifesto of Liberation. And, just to sort of draw some points from that article that I read that really touched my heart, that Islam is a system of liberation through submission. And it liberates our heart and our soul, our mind and our intellect, and our body and our character, and it liberates us from the society, from all these things that are destructive to mankind. And this is only and only through submission and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which allows us to explore religion, and to explore our souls, and to strive towards Islam in its true sense.
Can I add to that actually as well? I love that definition. Yes, thank you, sister. I see it also liberation as a rescue from this dunya's distractions. There is so much noise out there, especially now. It's always been there. Distractions have always been there. But especially now with media and social media, etc. Yes, we have our ritual acts that help us, inshallah, to enter Jannah. We have fasting, praying, charity, etc. But sometimes there's some acts that tend to be overlooked. And you mentioned about our love for Allah, and that's what it is, it's our love for Allah. When we want to please Allah, in order to please Allah, what do? We respect and we fulfill the rights of our parents, for example. Parents need to fulfill the rights of their children. Spouses fulfill the rights of each other. When we fulfill each other's rights, we create strong, stable members of society. When we fulfill rights, for example, of our neighbours, of other members of society, our colleagues at work, our ruler, wherever you may be, and they fulfill the rights of the masses who they rule over, we create strong, stable communities. But do you see the knock-on effect that when you do please Allah, how you create that strong societies?
Everything falls into place. Everything becomes beautiful, and without really, there's a lot of thought goes into what brings in happiness, and what to do, and we forget the core aspect that the pleasure that you get, or the satisfaction that you get by connecting to your Lord. And when you are doing things that you feel like your God is happy with you, even the thought of heaven and hell doesn't come in anymore. You know, even if at the end of the road there is nothing, that if you live your life every day with just that feeling of knowing that he is pleased with me, I don't think there is anything else that can give you more happiness than that, or more pleasure than that. You know, but then if that is the case, and that we are talking about Islam, but that is a common theme throughout all the religions. So why has religion gotten such a bad name at the moment? What's the crux of it?
People have made a bad name for it. Religion per se doesn't have a bad name, and Islam doesn't have a bad name. But it's the people that practice it. It's, we say Bani Adam. It's humankind. It's mankind that have created all this segregation and the distractions. It's mankind. But again, I say that Islam is empowering. I don't see how Islam can... it's
no, that's
liberating.
Fine. Yeah. So there are two aspects here. You know, there is first of all the way people practice their religion, which gives it the negative connotation. So, you know, we've heard of things like ISIS, you know, the Takfiri ideology. There is similar concept within, you know, all the religions in Christianity, and, you know, the extremist of every aspect, which give the religion a bad name. But that's only one aspect of it. There is the hidden aspect of it, which is this whole movement and silent way of ideological war, almost, of ensuring that, you know, secularism takes over generally around the world. Sister Sukina, do you feel like we are having enough of this discussion, that there is enough awareness about how that secularism is actually a planned thing? It's being, you know, fed to us, it's being pushed down on our children's throats, and, you know, religion is being made to feel like something very old-fashioned, you know, and limiting.
So, just going back to why religion has gotten such a bad name, so I would say that acts in the name of religion, as well as you know, extremists on either side of the spectrum, give all religions a bad name. Not just Islam, but all religions a bad name. And these acts are most times not even condoned by the religion in whose names it is carried out. So I would say that religion has been misused for organized gain by different groups for their own profit and their own interests, distorting the value of religion and giving it a bad name. In terms of is there an organized push towards secularism? Yes, definitely. I do feel that there is. And I feel that, you know, there is a number of reasons for this agenda. You know, I think that there is this common belief going around that religion is a barrier to the progress of science and humanity, and that it is that religion is a political tool for self-control, and that you know, religion has been misconstrued so, you know, in so many different forms, that it is a threat to human rights, it is a threat to globalization, it is harmful to society. And because of all of these different aspects, and especially in relation to Islam, Islam has been misunderstood and deliberately misinterpreted by people that oppose religion. And so this is where I feel the push towards secularism is happening.
Final word to you, Sister Wesson. You know, who is a religion threat to?
I don't know. They have a problem with Islam. Can I just say about Islam, though, there's a lot of things that we've mentioned in our discussion, that everything now, as a life coach, everything that the Quran teaches, you'll find in self-help books. Go and read all the famous self-help books. Literally, when I'm reading them, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma, for example, Salat al-Fajr, for example. Atomic Habits by James Clear, talking about habits, daily habits, and creating healthy habits. Again, perhaps it's salah or, you know, other activities. Meditation, journaling. It's everything that empowers us. It's everything that gives us inner peace. It's everything that gives us fulfillment, contentment. And isn't that what everybody's trying to strive for? Absolutely. So again, it's just the labelling. It's just the labelling of Islam. And again, people have misconstrued, but also given Islam a really, really bad name. And unfortunately, only the bad gets put onto media. Whereas, and I can remember even, you know, growing up, when people used to come to my house, for example, they used to honestly be so amazed at how normal we were.
Yeah.
You know, behind the hijab, we would be hospitable, we would be respectful, we'd have the same food. I don't know what people were expecting otherwise, but they've heard different
so much
things.
negative things. And I think, you know, end of the day, it's this, whatever religion it may be, I think basically we all strive towards God. And just that concept of striving towards that ulterior, you know, power, there's a lot of positivity in that, like we have discussed. And at any cost, we need to fight for that, and we need to find a way to protect that. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to thank Sister Wesson and thank you, Sister Sukina. You've both been amazing. And thank you all for watching. Inshallah, I'll see you again next week, same time. Khuda Hafiz.